Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold exploration today. We will hear from Matthew Lennox-King, CEO of Contact Gold. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this Contact Gold webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the Contact Gold corporate presentation that can be found on the company's website, contactgold.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. And please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures related to Contact Gold. So Contact is focused on gold exploration in Nevada. Although there's been quite a lot of gold exploration done in the state, Contact continues to demonstrate that there are new discoveries to be made. And the company has 2 projects and has successfully discovered new gold zones and delineated near-surface mineralization at both. With that, I now turn it over to Matt to update our audience on the company.
Great, fantastic. And thanks very much, Tim, for the great introduction. Very happy to be here with you all to learn more about Contact Gold. So as Tim pointed out, I am Matt Lennox-King, the president and CEO of Contact Gold. We are a venture-listed, Nevada-focused gold exploration company. And we have our cautionary statement, of course, which Tim directed you to. And look, we're focused on oxide gold assets. So these are typically near surface and easily processed gold deposits in what we believe is a tier 1 and one of the very best jurisdictions, being Nevada. So we have within the company Green Springs and Pony Creek as our 2 main projects. We're led by a team with a long track record of global discovery, M&A success, and shareholder value creation. And our focus is on high potential projects, be it our own or through looking at future M&A opportunities. We are forging ahead at both our key projects, being Green Springs and Pony Creek. Certainly this morning, we're very excited to announce a maiden or initial resource estimate for our Pony Creek project of 433,000 pit-constrained ounces at an average grade of 0.52, which is really right in the sweet spot grade-wise for Nevada. At Green Springs, we made 3 gold discoveries in 2021, and I'll take you through those in the presentation as well. And I think importantly, both our key projects, being Green Springs and Pony Creek, are fully permitted for drilling. The next round of drilling at Green Springs will be funded through our recently closed $3 million private placement that took place late in 2022. To introduce you to the leadership team, on the board of directors, we're led by our chairman, John Dorward, who until recently was the president and CEO of Roxgold until their takeover by Fortuna Silver Mines. I've worked with John for well over 10 years at a variety of companies. We also have George Solomas, who's the president and CEO of Integra Resources, advancing their gold project in Idaho. We also have Charlie Davies, who is the head of exploration at Waterton Global Resource Management. And we have Riaz Lalani as well, who comes more from the technology and medical side of the market. Joining me on the management side of the equation, we have Andrew Farncombe, who joins us from the corporate finance and investment banking side of the business. We have John Wenger as our CFO and VP strategy, another Pilot Gold and Frontier Gold alumni, and really the most important person as far as advancing those Nevada assets and making additional discoveries is our Vice President of Exploration, Vance Spalding, another long-time colleague of mine. And Vance has a very impressive track record of discoveries, both within Nevada and globally. As for myself, I am a geologist by background. Over 25 years active in the sector, both on the ground, leading programs and making discoveries in my own right, and then the better part of the last decade on the corporate side of things. To take you through our current capital structure, our current trading range is around 4.5 to 5 cents Canadian. At 301 million shares outstanding, that gives us a market cap of approximately 13.5 to 14 million. Cash on hand to fund our next round of drilling at Green Springs is approximately 2.8 million Canadian. If we look at our major shareholders, Waterton Global Resource Management, which is the large mining-focused private equity fund out of Toronto, owns approximately a third of the company. Institutional investors own roughly 27%. Management and insiders, we own 7% of the company, which means that retail or unaccounted for shareholders account for or own another 33% of the company. So we'll jump right into Nevada. We believe very strongly that Nevada is one of the very best jurisdictions to discover, develop, and ultimately mine gold. If we look at it on an annual basis, it accounts for approximately 75% or 3/4 of US gold production. On an annual basis, it fluctuates between the 4th and 6th largest global gold producer. And that means somewhere on the order of 5 million ounces per year of gold are mined in Nevada. A couple key things that I think are very exciting, very topical. One, discoveries still get made on an ongoing basis in Nevada, and those are made by large companies like Barrick and much smaller companies like Contact Gold. And that's in spite of the long and well-established mining culture and mining industry in Nevada. The second thing that I think is topical and quite exciting for earlier stage companies is that the M&A scene or mergers and acquisition scene in Nevada was quite active in 2021. We saw AngloGold bid for and ultimately have a transaction approved to acquire Corvus Gold. That was approximately a $500 million Canadian transaction. We've seen Calibre bid for and successfully, this will close tomorrow, but successfully acquire Fiore Gold, who is our neighbor at Green Springs. And we've seen the creation of I-80 Gold, led by Ewan Downey, and their acquisition and build out of their project portfolio. So certainly very active. And I think that speaks to the quality of projects, the high margins, and the general attractiveness of exploring and mining in Nevada. So we'll jump off our project summary here at Pony Creek, where we do have, as of this morning, initial resources at Pony Creek. So that's 433,000 inferred pit-constrained ounces. These are Carlin-type ounces, so gold hosted in sedimentary rocks, typically limestones or limestone-related rocks. And this is based on both a historical database that we acquired with the project, but also the product of almost 26,000 meters of drilling completed by Contact Gold since July 2017. It's on the heels of a very significant success rate in drilling, at over 90% of our drill holes hitting gold. And this all takes place on a fully permitted for exploration property. To drill down a bit deeper on the district where we are operating, we have Pony Creek here in the south with that maiden resource estimate. As we come to the north, we run into Gold Standard Ventures and their South Railroad project. So that's at feasibility stage. And they are also working on permitting what we believe will be Nevada's next open pit gold mine. Further to the north still, we have Nevada Gold Mines, which is of course the joint venture between Barrick and Newmont Mining, where they have the Rain Mine and the Emigrant Mine. So all told, we're looking at a very productive and prospective belt of rocks totaling about 40 kilometers strike length from north to south. Now to come into the Pony Creek resource estimate, so to take you through some of the particulars there, we're looking at 433,000 pit-constrained ounces at an average grade of 0.52. The overall strip ratio is quite low. It's less than 3-to-1, which is very attractive. And that is hosted within the Bull Zone here in the southern part of the resource area. That accounts for 340,000 of those ounces. The Appaloosa Zone, and finally Stallion, which accounts for about 63,000 of those ounces. Now, we believe there are some really compelling opportunities to grow this resource base over time. Stallion and the Bull Zone, they have clear exploration targets that we believe can be systematically drilled to add to that resource base. And if we look at the pit outlines, which are in red, and the block model, which are the blues, greens, and yellows, we can see that there's quite a lot of material that sits outside the pit-constrained resource, and we believe through efficient and effective drilling, we can convert a lot of what is not currently pit-constrained into pit-constrained resources over time. So this is very much a snapshot in time of what Pony Creek is today, and we think offers some really clear avenues to increasing the size of that estimate. Before we leave the resource estimate, we've got two images here for you, both of which are cross sections cut through that resource block model. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have the Bull Zone. In this case, we're looking to the west. In red, we have the outline of that open pit. And within that, we can see the mineralized block model. And certainly the warmer colors represent higher grades. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have a section cut through the Stallion Zone. We can clearly see the near surface nature of that mineralization. And within that red pit outline, we can see virtually all the material within that pit is gold mineralized. So certainly near surface, and we're not talking about a high ore to waste ratio here. Leaving Pony Creek, we will come down to the southern end of the Cortez trend, so the parallel trend to the Carlin, to our Green Springs project. So this is a large outcropping or at-surface gold system that saw limited mining in the late 1980s. Less than 80,000 ounces were mined here. And we acquired the project in mid-2019 with the belief that there were considerable opportunities to both make new gold discoveries and also expand on what had been done there. And certainly with our drilling in specifically 2020 and 2021, we've started to realize that goal, or realize those expectations with a number of new gold discoveries, what we call Tango and Xray, where we have thick intervals up to almost 55 meters of really strong gold grades, ranging from just over half a gram to nearly 3 grams, or 2.93 grams per ton. So very exciting. We've also discovered a new zone of mineralization beneath the old Green Springs mine that we call the mine trend, and then have had significant drill results from existing zones. As far as where Green Springs is located, it is located 7 kilometers immediately to the east of Fiore Gold's Gold Rock and Pan mine. And if we look at those deposits in a little bit more detail, Pan is roughly 21 million tons at an average grade of 0.42, and that is an active heap leach operation, currently producing about 40,000 ounces per year. Gold Rock is a development project, roughly 19 million tons at an average grade of 0.66 grams per ton. So here at Green Springs, our next steps, we've made those new discoveries at Tango and Xray, and our plan here is to get back on the ground in early February and follow up aggressively those two discoveries that we made in 2021. So looking at the target overview at Green Springs, within the large red outline, we have the mine trend. So that represents roughly 3 kilometers of drill-defined oxidized gold mineralization. So rusty, amenable in theory to heap leach processing, so very low cost. And along that trend, we have multiple zones where we're getting over 2 grams per ton of gold and over 20 meters of thickness. It remains open to the south, and we can visualize roughly 1.5 kilometers of extensions, potential extensions, before we hit our southern boundary. Outside of the mine trend is what we would consider our frontier or more greenfields targets. So in the extreme east, we have Whiskey and Foxtrot, which are large-scale exploration targets defined by soil sampling, rock sampling, geophysics, which have never been drilled. They're each closing in on a kilometer of strike length, and we think represents some really intriguing, really exciting blue sky potential here at Green Springs. To the north and west of those, we have the Xray and Tango discoveries sitting in this northeastern oriented corridor, and we have the Alpha Zone in the middle there. And that zone is really our immediate focus here at Green Springs. So to put this in real space for us, here we're looking at some drone imagery, looking due north up Green Springs. The red arrow represents the strike length of the mine trend, and we've pulled out some of our select drill holes from the south through to the northern end of the mine trend for you. We can see Whiskey and Foxtrot off to the east of the mine trend, and importantly, we can also see that Xray Tango corridor with our new discoveries from 2021 just to the north there. So we'll come from this view over to take a closer look at Xray and Tango. And really here we're looking at shallow oxidized gold mineralization hosted in a rock unit called the Pilot Shale, which does host some impressive deposits elsewhere in northeastern Nevada. We're looking at extensive oxidation. So the sulfide minerals here at Xray and Tango are gone, leaving rusty rock with potentially very good gold recoveries. Now this corridor runs from the northern end of the mine trend through the Xray discovery, where we have up to a 40-meter thickness at 1.28 grams per ton, through Alpha, which is an established, also outcropping zone of gold mineralization, up to Tango, which is the other new discovery. And there we have up to nearly 55 meters of thickness, grades up to 1 gram per ton. Over time, we believe there's a pretty compelling opportunity to ultimately connect this into a continuous or semi-continuous zone of gold mineralization. Looking through Xray, in this scenario would remain true if we're looking at Tango. We have our outcropping and shallow gold mineralization, both in rock samples collected by contact, and also in drill holes or in those discovery holes. We can see on the slide here that this discovery zone remains wide open to the west, and also it remains wide open out of the slide towards us, and this will be the focus of that winter drilling here at Green Springs. Just to reiterate those next steps, while we do have a number of targets across Green Springs, we're going to be really focused on Xray and Tango and expanding those outcropping gold discoveries that we made in 2020 with that next phase of drilling. Of course, the Foxtrot and Whiskey targets, they're very exciting and we think offer some pretty compelling opportunities for future discoveries. So if we look at Contact Gold and really what's underpinning the company here, we have the two high-quality Nevada gold projects, both on established gold trends next to emerging and active mines. As of this morning, we have that maiden resource estimate at Pony Creek with 433,000 pit-constrained ounces at a very attractive grade. We believe there are pretty clear opportunities to expand that resource footprint at the Bull, at Stallion, at Appaloosa, and by testing new targets. And of course, that's an opportunity that, given the drill seasonality at Pony Creek, that has to wait until late May to get back on the ground there. We're also very excited to get back to Green Springs for that phase 2 drilling opportunity to follow up on the high-grade oxide, Tango, and Xray discoveries. And it's really the focus there is on expanding the footprint of both those targets on the way to increase footprint size and ultimately resources down the road. And of course, we're grateful for the support from our shareholders with our recently closed $3 million private placement that will fund that next round of drilling to follow up on those discoveries at Green Springs. Within Contact, we have the 2 high-quality projects on established trends in Nevada. We now have over 400,000 ounces, in-pit ounces underpinning Pony Creek and the opportunity there. And we're very optimistic for what 2020 will bring at both our projects. So thank you very much for tuning in. You can, of course, follow us on the website, contactgold.com, at the info account, or of course, on our social media channels, such as LinkedIn and Twitter. So thank you very much. I appreciate you tuning in and look forward to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for a very informative presentation. As you mentioned, we'll now move to the Q&A portion of the webinar.
Great.
Reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We do have a few questions already. First, obviously, you just had a resource for Pony Creek. When will there be an initial resource for Green Springs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly one that does come up. At Green Springs, I think we still need to complete more drilling specifically on those new discoveries. And I think in an ideal scenario, if we're successful with that winter drill program, maybe we need a little bit of additional drilling on top of that. But I'd say that would be very much a year-end 2022 type of opportunity, or type of milestone, I should say.
Okay, great. And one other question, kind of looking at 2022, how do you see splitting your, I guess, financial resources between the 2 projects this year?
Yeah, great question, and certainly I think the resource estimate at Pony Creek really makes that a very topical question. In the short term, we'll be 100% focused on following up those Green Springs discoveries. Pardon me. Following up those Green Springs discoveries, and as we get into that May season, we'll be designing and optimizing that Pony Creek follow-up program. So a little bit early to say, but certainly both projects with the opportunities that we see there do beg for drilling.
Great. And one question here. Have you had any discussions, obviously next door with Green Springs, next door to Fiore, and now merging with Contact Gold? Have you had any discussions with them about potentially combining or selling the project?
That's a really good question, and I think one aspect of Green Springs that's attractive, and certainly Pony Creek, is that we do have larger established neighbors, and certainly in the case of Green Springs, we have Caliber who's coming in. They're much larger. They've tended to be an aggressive group, and I think the best way to put it is make a point of maintaining an active dialogue with all of our neighbors, without putting too much of a fine point on it.
Okay, great. And one question here, more kind of a little open-ended here, but how is Contact valued compared to other companies in Nevada?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you were to look at our market cap of about $15 million, I think we're certainly on the low end of comparable companies. If we look at Millennial Precious Metals, if we look at New Legacy Gold, and certainly New Legacy is a pre-resource company, we're valued on the lower end of that spectrum, in spite of having what I think are very, very attractive projects. So I guess the read through there is, do we see upside in Contact given our assets and the address? Yes, we do. Great.
And then kind of looking at, and you had touched on this with both projects, but looking at the blue sky exploration side of things on your projects, can you touch a little more on that and what you're seeing on each project and what you see as the potential?
Absolutely. So both projects, if we look at Pony Creek, we have always believed and really remained pretty steadfast in our belief that there is, pardon me, that there is a huge amount of upside potential at Pony Creek. Our progress did slow down in 2019 and early 2020. We ran into a permitting hurdle that's since been surpassed. So that 433,000 ounces, we really view as a starting point, and we see significant opportunities both to grow that incrementally, but also to make new discoveries that we feel will ultimately be reflected in resources down the road. At Green Springs, we see a huge amount of exploration potential. We really have been operating on the ground there for just over 2 years. We really understand the gold system, we understand what the opportunities are, and we understand how we're going to tackle them, how that's going to relate to growth. We're not particularly interested in ending up with small deposits. We're interested in large, attractive, ultimately commercially viable projects, and that's why we're exploring at both Pony Creek and Green Springs.
Great. And then, what is the ownership? You have 100% ownership of the properties, or are they under agreements to earn in, and are there royalties on the projects?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with Pony Creek. So Pony Creek is 100% owned. There is currently a 3% royalty that's actually held by Sandstorm, and there is a buy down of 1%, or there was a buy down of 1% on that royalty. Green Springs is under a purchase option agreement, now previously with Ely Gold Royalties, now held by Gold Royalty Corp. And there's roughly 18 months to go on that. It's a very straightforward, very low cost, and we do actually have the ability to accelerate that at any time. Over the key areas at Green Springs, there are a variety of royalties, but they average out also to about a 3% NSR on that front as well.
Okay, great. And one kind of more technical question is, do you have 43-101 reports available for your projects?
There are 43-101 reports for both Green Springs and Pony Creek. The clock starts ticking today on an updated report for Pony Creek, given the resource estimate this morning. So that'll be a maximum of 45 days from today that we file that report.
Great. And obviously, with you have a major shareholder in Waterton. What is their role? Are they an active participant, and what are they looking for long term?
Yeah, absolutely, great question, and certainly one that comes up quite frequently, given Waterton's ownership stake at 33% in the company, and how active they've been in the state of Nevada over the better part of 10 years, to be honest. So Waterton was one of the original shareholders in the company. They've at various times owned as much as 42%, so that's lower today. And to be honest, they are a very strong, very supportive shareholder. They are looking to management to advance the assets, create value in the ground, and ultimately see that translate to value in the market. But as far as do they have an active role? No, they're very supportive and allow management and the board to and chart the course for the company.
Great. And then looking ahead a little bit here, and I think you had mentioned, but what are the plans for 2022 at Pony Creek? Obviously, you have the funding to drill at Green Springs, but Pony Creek, are you in a position to drill there this year?
We would very much like to drill there. Really, that's something that has to wait before we can actually get on the ground until late May, early June. In a typical year, you have a huge amount of snow cover, and it is quite high elevation. So in theory, you could get in there in the winter or in the spring. It would be very expensive and not very efficient. So with the resource estimate in hand, we'll go through the process of designing that drill program and deciding on how much to drill, where to drill, and when to implement that. But there are clear opportunities to grow that initial resource, and we think that's something that could be done this year, certainly.
Great. And then looking a little bit at Green Springs, obviously you had a photo there of the past producing pit, which is more kind of in the side of the hill there. I guess where are the targets that you'd look to drill with regards to kind of lay of the land and the topography?
Yeah, absolutely. So the initial drilling, or the next phase of drilling, will happen at Xray and Tango. So they are a little bit north and a little bit east of the mine trend. So slightly higher elevation. If we're looking at the image that's actually behind me there, they would be kind of up the hill to the left a bit there. So when we relate Green Springs back to Pony Creek, it's lower elevation by at least 1,000, if not 2,000 feet. So we tend to have a lower snowpack and much better access during the winter months.
Okay, great. And infrastructure access, what is that like for each of the projects?
Absolutely, great question. And in both cases, we have really good road access. I was going to say you could drive a sedan to both projects. You could get most of the way in a sedan, but there is a really well-established network for both projects of gravel roads, most of which are maintained by the local county. And in the case of Green Springs, we actually have the old mine roads to access a good portion of the project. So as far as getting to site, it's great. There is power relatively close by to both as well.
Okay, great. And one question related to the resource, obviously, for Pony Creek. What is the breakdown as far as oxide and sulfide of that resource?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the estimate was done on a recovery basis. So looking at initial gold recoveries as it relates to cyanide solubility, rather than a strict oxide sulfide model. So and this is approximate, of course, but approximately 50% would be what we'd consider truly oxidized. Roughly 25% would be what we consider transitional, and that the balance, or the remaining 25%, would be what we'd consider to be sulfide or unoxidized. One interesting thing that we see at Pony Creek thus far, compared to perhaps some of what you'd see on the very northern Carlin trend, is Pony Creek is very, very low in carbon, meaning that with what we know now, and certainly more testing is needed, but that you can likely process that unoxidized mineralization with cyanide rather than needing to send it to a roaster or an autoclave, meaning you could look at a vat leach or a tank leach scenario to optimize gold recovery from that unoxidized material.
Yeah, that's certainly important. Obviously, with as we think of Carlin type deposits, the sulfides as refractory, but that would
exactly
make a difference. Great. And similarly for Green Springs, is that all oxide, or I guess what's the breakdown that you're looking at there?
Yeah, we have seen very little sulfide mineralization or unoxidized material at Green Springs so far. The vast majority of what we've drilled has been oxidized, and we evaluate that both visually, so the geologists on site will record it as black and full of sulfide, or oxidized and rusty, and we also do a cyanide solubility assay on everything that's mineralized or above 0.1 grams, and that gives us a good initial guide of potential processing by heap leach or cyanide solubility. So we've got a pretty good handle on what we're looking at Green Springs as far as oxidation.
Okay, great. And we did have one question that, and I would kind of combine it with a question. I guess thinking ahead, what do you see as the long-term strategy? Do you want to take projects through development, maybe become a producer, or are you looking to partner or sell, or what are your thoughts on that side of things?
That's always a great question, and I think it's always a pretty interesting thought exercise to go through. I firmly believe that regardless of where you want to end up, whether you want to go in production, whether you want to sell or partner, you always need to take what I would call a total project approach. So you're developing and advancing the project as if you're going to be the company who will ultimately end up developing it and building a mine. That you're not cutting corners on permitting, you're not cutting corners on geologic modeling, on metallurgy, on any of those really critical steps. And as far as our goal at the end of the day, is to advance these projects in the fashion that's going to return the greatest return for our shareholders. So as we advance, as we get additional resources, as we look at economics, if the answer is, yeah, Contact will make the best return for our shareholders by developing these projects ourselves, then that's the path that we would embark upon. If we're going down that path and a larger company said, look, we love what you're doing, we're going to make you an offer your shareholders 40 or 50% premium to where you're trading, well, that all of a sudden becomes a pretty compelling opportunity. And if you can crystallize a gain like that, an immediate gain for your shareholders, I certainly think it's something that you have to consider. Great.
And then looking at each of the projects, obviously we touched on the metallurgy and so on. Would they be standalone, likely standalone mines, or particularly with Pony Creek? Is it something where you would potentially partner with a neighboring operation that may have some of the processing facilities, or what would be the approach there?
It's a really good question, Tim. I think that overall, throughout my career, I've always been a big proponent of consolidation. I think you can have things can be a lot more efficient if you have a consolidated land position, if you have one dominant company in a district. That said, while I think that would or could be an attractive outcome for Pony Creek, we also believe that Pony Creek over time will reach a size where it could be a standalone on its own, standalone operation, and would not need to be acquired or consolidated as part of the wider district.
Great. And I guess one open-ended question, but what obviously you have plans to do exploration work and so on. But what do you see as really driving the share price and driving value for shareholders over the coming months and next year or two?
Look, that's always a great question, and certainly this end of the market has been quite challenging for most issuers over the last 12, 14, maybe 18 months. So for us, in many ways, it's sticking to our knitting, which is continuing to do really high quality work, advancing good projects. We are really keen on our partnership with Red Cloud to continue working with you guys to get the word out, to continue to broaden our audience and ultimately our shareholder base, and really continuing to review and tell the story better to more people. I think those are really critical. But I firmly believe that nothing drives value and awareness more than results. And if you continue to do the work, if you continue to deliver high quality results, then ultimately that will be rewarded in the market.
Great. And then just to review, well, actually, one other question. Do you still have any more assays pending from 2021 drilling?
We do not. Everything has been received and released as of early December.
Okay, great. And then kind of a review question, but what news would we expect to have then over the coming weeks and months here from Contact?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Next on track would be the start of drilling at Green Springs. That is slated for early February, exact day to still be determined. And then on the heels of that, I would expect, given that we're able to start in the winter, when things are a bit quieter, I would anticipate that we would start to see a flow of drill results based on that drilling in the weeks to follow there. So certainly a Green Springs focus in the short term.
Great. And I guess one follow up there, we hear from companies in Nevada, obviously a lot of activity in the state. You're able to get sometimes drill availability is a concern, and even getting skilled people is a challenge. There's competition out there. You've been able to get drills and to be able to do the work that you need?
Certainly, yeah. We have a really well established team down in Nevada that we've worked with both at Contact Gold and in prior companies like Pilot Gold. Drill availability, hasn't been too challenging with us. I think through our relationships, and specifically Vance, our VPX's relationships in Nevada, we tend to be able to get drills from reputable operators like Major Drilling and Bort Longyear, roughly when we need them. Great.
All right, great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have today. So I'd like to again thank Matt Lennox King from Contact Gold for presenting today, and thank you everyone out there for tuning in and for your keen interest and your questions today as well. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon when we present Canalaska Uranium, Wednesday, January 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And everyone have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, everyone.